steps. So, welcome everybody. I'm so super glad that you're here today because this time of year in the spring, I have heard from a lot of parents that, they get to the end of the IEP or the ARD meeting, and that's when they start talking about inclusion, because that's where, with my PowerPoint, and we will get started. So if you don't know me, I'm Charmaine Tanner. I'm a parent, retired teacher, and also an advocate for other families. So as I said, today is all about taking those 4 steps so we can get to inclusion. Now, I made this tool a number of years ago when I was an advocate. Well, when I guess maybe when I started being a professional advocate. And what I noticed when I looked at IEPs is there were often these dangling needs. A lot of needs would be written in the IEP, but they wouldn't be then met with a goal or an accommodation. So I made this chart for myself. And what I always want to do is start with the child's strengths. So your first step towards getting to inclusion is to make sure that your child's strengths are identified in each of the areas they're going to be getting special ed or related service help with, because those strengths are going to help us figure out what accommodations would be helpful for your child so they can be successful in general ed classrooms. Those strengths are going to help the classroom teacher understand your child as a whole person with lots of things to share. So again, I'm going to try and, for some reason this is not helping me. I want to make sure I can see if you're on with us, and I'm not sure I see myself being live. So let's stop sharing for a second here. One of the things that I also wanted to tell you is if you would like a copy, I made a eBook that's getting to inclusion in 4 steps, and the 4 steps you have to take. So in the eBook, I give some examples of these 4 steps already filled out in different areas like, academics and communication and social. I also give you some blank forms in here that you can use when you want to do something like this for your child. So if you go over to, and I've got to connect, I'm going to escape. I think I have too many things going on here. I need to connect our little bot, our IEP bot, to our post here. And then we can make sure that you will automatically get that. So all you have to do is type in hashtag. Oh, I got to do one more thing. All you have to do is type in hashtag 4 steps, and my IEP bot then should take you to the link where you get the free ebook. So let's go back to my PowerPoint. As I said, when I first started doing advocacy work, I made this tool for myself, and what I wanted to do was to kind of keep track of what was written when I saw draft IEPs, because sometimes it can be like really confusing, right? So I just looked at different areas like literacy, math, social studies, and science. I also looked at communication, social behavior. And the student that I was working on for this, those were the areas where that student had strengths and needs, and we were also going to be putting in, specific goals and reaching out to get him included more. So what we do like I said, is sometimes what you can do if you get a draft IEP from your child's teacher is just look at the draft IEP and plug in things that you see. So if your child has communication goals, plug in the strengths. So write that in the strengths box for communication. When you write the needs, or when you see what needs are written in the draft IEP, put those in that box. So each step, the strengths, step 2 is talking about the needs, step 3 is the goals, step 4 is accommodations, modifications, assistive tech. If you're using a blank form like this, you would just want to look at the draft IEP and write in the corresponding column what you see in that draft IEP. Now, chances are you might not see many strengths, so that's what you want to make sure you capitalize on. But let's go through and I'll show you some specific examples. So let me check, see if we have any questions. But yeah, just type in hashtag 4 steps, and then you should be getting the link. And I don't know why I'm not seeing this on my phone. Like, there we go. Okay, cool. So, well, let me see if we have any questions, because I see we have some people. So Lisa says, yes, we're live. Susan says, hello. And Lisa typed in 4 steps. And Brad typed in hashtag 4 steps. Cool. We're ready. If you want to find out more information about a closed membership group we have, you can go to my Facebook page at the top, click on this image, and you'll get more info. So this is a picture, and of course this slide, is like too small to read. So I just want to show you, though, that it's filled out in each of the areas, and then what we're going to do is take one area at a time. So if your child has literacy needs, which I think all kids do, right? Those are reading, writing kinds of skills, because we want our kids working on academics when they're at school. So you're going to look at, like I said, a variety of areas, but let's zero in on literacy. So step 1 is looking at strengths. So here's an example of this student that I was working with at the time. And so we look at, reading and writing skills and what were the child's strengths. But what we saw is that he really wants to learn how to read better. He does well with visual approaches, and he can read second grade materials. So again, we want to start from that base of what the child's strengths are. And then we're going to look at needs. And so for this child, we said, he really needs to be able to read for enjoyment with typical peers. He needs to be able to follow written directions, and we want him understanding that when he reads, he can actually learn new information. So needs in step 2 is where you first want to start talking about your child being included with others. Like I said, we don't want to wait till the end of the IEP meeting before we start building our case. So we have our strengths. Those are great things that general ed teachers can build on. Now we talk about our needs, and in the needs, we want to talk about the importance of our kids being with typical age peers, like for communication models, for behavior models. We want students actually engaged in the general ed classroom, learning these skills in that way. So in your needs section, you always want to put in some phrase in there about your child needing to be with typical peers in order to, and then, it depends on your child. You can say, Bobby needs to be with his 4th grade typical peers while he is learning to read nonfiction books. And so again, at the beginning, you're going to be building your case. So you've talked about strengths, you've talked about needs, and then the next step that you're going to do, let's go back to the PowerPoint, is step 3, where you're going to look at the goals. So as a parent, I don't expect you to write measurable goals. So if you're using this form for your child, just write the goal from, what you want him to be able to do. It's up to, the IEP team to come up with the exact measurable goal in that language. But it helps if you brainstorm as a parent, or if you're working with an advocate, brainstorm some wording for the goal. So in this case, because I was working with a mom, we did look at writing more measurable goals. And in this one, it says, in his 5th grade classroom, Ryan will read aloud a story from a 3rd grade basal reader with 95% accuracy at a rate of 110 words per minute on a weekly probe for 6 consecutive or consistent weeks. And so what we're looking at is he's going to be reading some modified assignments, but we want him to be able to do that within the 5th grade classroom. So we put that as a need. And that, before we put that as a need, then when we write the goal, we want to make sure that we insert in the 5th grade classroom, Ryan is going to do X, Y, Z. So let me pause here for just a moment, because I was just talking to a mom, I think it was yesterday on the phone, and I was going through some of these ideas with her, and she said, well, Charmaine, if we try to say, where the goal is going to take place at our meeting, the district gets really upset. They say we can't talk about placement and put placement in a goal. And I think, I understand that perception, or that, that philosophy. However, if you look at a lot of goals, like speech and language goals, a lot of times the SLPs will write in their goals in a structured setting, with a small group of students, Susan will, and whatever the goal is. And so I'm saying, if it's okay for SLPs to write in an IEP in a structured setting with a small group, I think it's okay for the rest of us, when we're working on things like academic goals, is to define where we're going to be doing that, because we want the teaching to happen in the general ed classroom, and we want the progress monitoring to happen in the general ed classroom. So if we have a goal that doesn't say where it's going to happen, then it's really hard to make sure that your child is learning this in natural settings and being evaluated in those same natural settings for how well he or she is doing. So let me see if we have any comments and if all of this makes sense. So yeah, type in your questions. If you're live with us, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. If you're watching the replay, yay. I know we're busy parents, so sometimes it's hard to be able to take your noontime to be on a live show, but I appreciate you being here. So let me know if you have any questions. If you have ever tried to write specific things in the needs or in the goals, and you've gotten some, flack back from the administrators of not wanting to do that. Let's look at what our 4th step is for getting to inclusion. So the 4th step is we want to be really specific with our accommodations, modifications, assistive technology that the child is going to need in order to be successful. So one of the things that I think is really important when we look at accommodations is not to go through this laundry list of, preferential seating, extra time on tests, copy of teacher's notes, those generic things. Let's kind of put those aside. What I want you to think about for accommodations is to go back to step 1, where you identified your child's strengths. So in step 1 for this student, we identified that he was a visual learner. So when we get to step 4, which is our accommodations section, that's when we want to remember those strengths and say, yay, if we built on these strengths and used them as accommodations, our kids would be so much more successful. So for accommodations, as much as possible, I like them to be really specific and give a reason why you're going to have that. So in this case, you could say something like, because Ryan is a visual learner, he will have an individualized visual schedule on his desk every day to use. So this is a little bit different than just writing visual schedule as an accommodation. One, we're going to say, because he's a visual learner, so it makes sense, right? Kids that are more auditory learners probably don't need or want the visual schedule. We know he's a visual learner. We want an individualized visual schedule, because sometimes I've gone into classrooms and the teacher will have, the class schedule written up on the whiteboard, but guess what? That's not this student's individualized schedule. And it's not on his desk where he can really access it and see it, instead of having to find it and search, up on the whiteboard and maybe not being able to see it very clearly. So be specific when you're doing your accommodations. Draw your accommodations from the strengths that your child has. And then also remember to look at assistive technology. A lot of times teams only think about assistive technology as an augmentative communication device, but that's not true. It can be low tech, like, picture symbols that your child's going to use. It can be, software on a laptop or a Chromebook. It can, be that, pencil grip that he uses when he's doing writing. So remember to always be thinking about assistive tech when you look at each one of those goals that your child's going to have. So after we do step 1, which is writing your strengths, step 2, writing needs and making sure that you address why they need to be with typical peers. Step 3 is writing goals and what you're going to have in the goals as far as the setting. And step 4 is accommodations, modifications, assistive tech. And guess what? That leads to your case at the end of the meeting when you talk about the least restrictive environment. Because you can say, in the needs, we talked about how Ryan needed to be with his typical 4th grade, 5th grade peers during reading group time. When we wrote the goal, we talked about how he's going to be doing this with his, friends in the 5th grade classroom. So now when we look at, where is that going to happen, we need to say, well, for this goal, for these needs, it's going to happen in the general ed classroom. So let me know if you've got any questions and if this is all making sense to you. I think what's exciting is that there are so many possibilities and opportunities that we have during IEP or ARD meetings to talk and infuse the conversation with our kids being included in general ed classrooms. So as I said, if you want to get this handy dandy eBook that I wrote about getting to inclusion in 4 steps, just type in the word #4steps, and hopefully my bot is responding to you. If not, I'll come back after our show and give you the link. So let me know if you have any questions about this technique. The one thing that we're going to be doing tonight for people who are in our Parent Advocacy Trailblazer group is we're going to be going into more depth with actually how to do this with your child's information. I'll talk about that in a minute. So if you want more information about our Parent Advocacy Trailblazer group, you can go to the top of my Facebook page, click on this image, and it will take you there. But tonight what we're going to do is we're going to have a training in our closed membership group, and I'm going to take information from the parents in our group, and we're going to go through a blank template like we have in our ebook, and we're going to use specific information about their child and kind of map that out. So if you are a parent advocate trailblazer, like I see Julie is on with us, Lissa. So yeah, make sure that you come over to our closed Facebook group tonight at 7, and we'll be working on that. And then I wanted to tell you about what's happening next Thursday. We're going to have a really super guest. I'm like so excited. Here is one of her quotes. It says, "Honestly, I don't have a problem saying what needs to be said." And this is a wonderful mom who just is like popping old paradigm shifts and kind of blowing them up. She's going to be talking about ableism and how that really prevents our kids from being accepted, our kids from being successful in inclusive classrooms. So next Thursday, noon Mountain Time, we're going to have Dinah Carew Olson with us, and she'll be talking about disability, ableism, and how that really impacts our kids. So it's a great topic, not often gets talked about, I think. So I encourage you to stay with our Facebook page, Visions and Voices Together. Make sure you like it. And we will be back next week. And I'm going to do one more check. Julie says, hooray, she's looking forward to our training in our membership group tonight. So yeah, that'll be helpful, right? So until next Thursday, you guys have a wonderful rest of your weekend, and we shall see you soon. Bye-bye.